Hi everyone, today we will discuss Chapter 3 of Environmental Engineering. So we will learn the concept of environmental ethics and also the concept of environmental impact assessment. So we will begin with the environmental ethics. So what is environmental ethics? Ethics are the rules or beliefs about what is right and what is wrong. So, ethics comes from the origin of ethics is from the Greek word ethos, which means character or customary or habitual. In this sense, ethics consists of the general beliefs, attitudes, or standards that guide customary behavior. So, environmental ethics studies how humans should behave toward nature and the environment. In simple words, I can say that it teaches how to respect and protect the earth, and it became important around 1970s. So why environmental ethics is important in engineering? We can say that industries focused only in the past on technical design and economic profit. However, nowadays we're focusing on the sustainability. Also, we are focusing when designing the industries on the health of human beings. So traditionally, industries and their basic components were designed based upon technical and economic considerations only. However, nowadays it is essential to consider environmental health and safety as factors during design. During any project, it is essential that economic sustainability is attained because sustainability and safety the first priority in designing the industries and other things. Okay, so environment ethics. This slide shows how our responsibility grows from ourselves, then family, then our community, then our country, then all humans, animals, all species and ecosystem. So it begins with ourselves, then with the family or kin, then with the social group or tribe, which is the community, then all people or the country, the people who are living in our country, then for all animals' life, all species on earth and all ecosystems on the earth. Moving outward from oneself, the circle would include duties to our family and relatives, our local community, our country, all humanity, mammals, all animals, all species, ecosystems, and ultimately the whole earth or the whole world. Then, with respect to environmental impact assessment, we studied the environmental effects like pollution, air pollution, water pollution, and other kind of environmental pollution. So the International Association for Impact Assessment, IAI, defines an environmental impact assessment as the process of 4 stages, which are identifying, then predicting, then evaluating, and mitigating or eliminating or reducing the harm. So the biophysical, social, and other relevant effects of development proposals prior to major decisions being taken and commitments made. So in this slide, we should know that EIA is a process used to identify environmental problems before starting a project, then to reduce or prevent the damage. Or we can say before building anything, we study its environmental impact and try to minimize the harm. First with identifying, then predicting, then evaluating, then mitigating. Okay, environmental ethics. So we discussed that identifying means what impacts will happen, then predicting what will happen in the future. We predict or we expect. Then evaluating, which is we consider, we evaluate whether it is good or bad. Then with mitigating, it means how to reduce harm or how to prevent it. Before that, we have to we should actually try to eliminate this harm. And if we can't mitigate this harm, we try to reduce or minimize its impact. Why do we need to study or use EIA? First, to study both positive and negative impacts. So an EIA is a process used to evaluate the potential environmental effects of proposed project or development, both positive and negative, before any decisions are made to move forward. The goal of an EIA is to identify, predict, and assess the environmental consequences of a project to minimize negative impacts on the environment and ensure sustainable development. So first, to identify, we study EIA, or we use it to study both positive and negative impacts, then to make better decisions, then to protect the environment, and finally to ensure the sustainable development. And environmental impact assessment consists of 4 stages, and each stage is having 2 steps. However, there is an additional step after we are environmental impact. So there are 9 steps. EIA process can be itemized into the following 9 steps, and it is consisting of 4 stages. As we said, public disclosure and participation are the key factors throughout the EIA system and should be implemented at the effective timing at every step. So people must be involved, community opinions matter in EIA. So everyone should have a say in projects that affect the environment. EIA steps may change from country to country. Practically, however, the timing of implementation differs by systems applied by each country. So before we describe the 4 stages of the environmental impact assessment, which are identifying, predicting, evaluating, and mitigating. Now we will go through the 9 steps of EIA, which are first with preliminary activities. In this step, we will have a brief summary and we will check the laws and regulations. Also, we will create our team, which consists of the coordinator and the decision maker. Then we will be having in the second step, which is called scoping. So we will see for what limit this project will be conducted, or we will decide what to study, what impacts to focus on the scoping. Then with the third step, which is the baseline study, it is written that establishing current environmental conditions, or I can say that we have to understand the current environment before establishing the project. Then we're having the impact evaluation, what effects will happen. Then in the 5th step, we will be having mitigation measures, which is developing strategies to reduce impact. Then alternative assessment, which is assessment of alternative measures. In the 7th step, we're having preparation of the final document. We will write the final report. Then the final step, it is the decision making. It is the 8th step. So if they accept the project, we will go for the 9th step, which is monitoring. First with preliminary activities and TOR meaning terms of reference. We will be having a reference to rely on. Preliminary activities includes, as I said before, checking laws and regulations and including a brief summary. Also, identifying the team or creating the team, which consists of the coordinator and the decision maker. We'll go detailedly in this. So preliminary activities include the defining of the terms of reference for the project and also the determining of the personnel required for the assessment. A brief summary of the project is extremely helpful at this stage. The summary should be clear. Then existing laws and regulation, we have to check laws and regulations. So then we will go for the last part in the preliminary activities, which is identifying the team. Members of the EIA team usually have the specialized professional expertise for different areas related to the various aspects of the project. The composition of the EIA team varies from country to country, as we said before. Okay, all these need to be identified and declared before the actual EIA process may begin. So that's why it is the first step. It is preliminary activities. Pre meaning like before we conducting the project, before we starting the project. Okay, then we're having scoping, which is the process of identifying environmental impacts of this project. So in this step, we will focus on the main environmental problems. So at a very early stage in the preparation of an EIA, the impacts of the project on the environment are identified. When the list of the impacts is very large, only the most significant impacts are selected. So we will focus on the significant environmental impacts. So this step determines the limits and the scope of the environmental degradation involved with the project. And we have 4 techniques in scoping. Help us to control or to save money, time and effort. So we're having techniques or 4 steps. I can say 4 techniques, which are checklist technique, matrix technique, networks techniques, or chain techniques. This is also called chain techniques. Then overlay technique. We have the 3rd step, which is baseline study. In this step, we are focusing on knowing the history of the place. So a baseline study is the study of original status of the environment in the area before the development work of the project started. So we will see the history of that place that we will conduct our project in. So the study serves the purpose of a base reference against which the changes due to implementation of the project are measured. Baseline studies are based on the experience with respect to environmental aspects and cover everything important about the environmental impacts of the project. On the other hand, a proper scoping highlights the significant environmental issues. So if we succeed in the scoping, we will be having good baseline study, because baseline study depends on the scoping. A proper scoping highlights the significant environmental issues of the project with respect to its locality and regional environment. Hence, scoping and baseline studies often run into each other. So they depend on each other. They are dependent on each other. But we cannot run it in the same time or do the 2 steps together. You have to focus on this point. Then environmental impact evaluation. In the first step, which is environmental impact evaluation, we will take the impacts from scoping and baseline, which are the 2nd and 3rd step. So we will take them and quantify them if possible. So we will give them numbers, but it is so hard to do so, and it is the most technical step. However, it is the most hard and controversial part of the EIA, because how can we quantify an environmental impact? So we cannot exactly quantify them. So environmental impact evaluation actually grows out of scoping and baseline study of the project. In this principle, EIA assigns various quantified values to different levels of the impacts affecting the project. So it is the most technical in nature. However, it is the most difficult and controversial part of the EIA. It is difficult because not every impact, especially natural and social impact, can be quantified. For example, if we want to build a factory, this is our project. So we have to evaluate air pollution, water pollution, and deforestation. So these three impacts, if you want to quantify them, for example, CO2 emissions will be 500 tons per year. This is a quantified number. So maybe in the future it will not be exactly 500 tons per year. So the CO2 emissions may be more than this or less than this. So it will affect a lot of people and it affects the environment. That's why it is the most hard or the most difficult step. So this step is the most costly step because also it is the most hard step in EIA. So impact evaluation actually calls for very careful considerations of the most important impacts and their accurate numerical representation. This has to be done not only for the proposed project but also for all possible alternatives because we will have more than one version of this project, so that a well-balanced final decision can be reached regarding the fate of the project. In this step also we will decide how serious the environmental impacts are. Also, impact evaluation is dependent on the quality of the scoping. So we mentioned scoping, the importance of scoping more than once. In this step, in the baseline study step, environmental impact evaluation. Moving to the fifth step, which is mitigation measures, we will try to reduce the environmental impact which will affect the environment, or we will try to minimize the intensity of these impacts. So it will be costly a little bit, however it will be beneficial in the long term. So mitigation measures are taken after the impact evaluation. These measures are taken to reduce the magnitude or intensity of the impacts affecting the environment. This of course will incur some cost, as we said, but it is expected that such measures will, in the long term or in the long run, mitigate the impact so as to make the project both economically and environmentally viable. Also, we will have to decide between the two versions of the project. We already said that we are having two alternatives. So either having a high cost and low pollution program or having a low cost but high pollution situation. But in real cases, having a high cost doesn't necessarily mean low pollution, and the same for low cost. It doesn't always mean that it will be having a high pollution situation. So in the sixth step, which is assessment of alternative measures, we will try to evaluate the alternative measures or try to compare them to these standards. They have to be aligning with the standards. So the proposed project and all other relevant versions have been examined for environmental impacts by now. They have also been corrected by applying the mitigation measures to minimize the adverse effects on the environment. They have also been subjected to some kind of standardization, such as impact quantification, so that all the relevant versions can be easily compared. The next step is to assess the environmental degradation and improvement in terms of economic losses and gains. So we will see also the economical side in this step. To summarize, in step 6, we compare different project alternatives and choose the best option based on environmental and economic factors. Also, we see a summary for each version using BCA benefit cost analysis to make the process easier. Then in the step number 7, which is preparation of the final document, we will write or prepare the final document or report to prepare a complete and detailed account of the EIA, and also to prepare a brief summarized account for a decision maker who may not be a technical person. In this document, we will complete a detailed account for the technical person, and we will prepare another account which is summarized briefly to the decision maker, who may not be a technical person. We would say for a non-technical person. So the detailed document is usually called as the reference document, which will be given to the technical person. This document is used by the technical personnel that is associated with the project. The referred part usually contains the technical calculations, graphs, and the results of field and laboratory measurements. So in this step, the summarized non-technical account is usually called as the working document, which is the brief, as we said, a brief summary will be given to the non-technical person. So we will give it to him, which is the working document, and the detailed one we will give it to the technical person, which is called reference document. But here, working document will be given to the non-technical person. So to summarize, in decision-making step, we will be having either one of the choices, either accepting the project or adding some points or ask for more study in some parts of the project, or reject the project completely. And this happens this is made by manager, committee, or authority. So the final decision either will be accepted, modified, or rejected. We also must consider the technical and economic aspects of the project alternatives. The decision is not only based on environment, but also on technology, cost, and sometimes politics. So you have to see this also. When the project is being accepted, we will be having the step number 9, which is monitoring of project implementation and its environmental impacts. Step number 9, they will monitor if the project is following the guidelines and the laws. So I can summarize that in this step, the project is monitored during and after implementation to ensure that environmental impacts are controlled and all guidelines are followed. That's it for today. Thank you for listening.